The keeper of room 9. The first thing I found in that room wasn't blood. It was a fingernail still painted, wedged between the mattress and the headboard. And the front desk log said the woman who'd slept there had checked out 4 hours earlier. Except she never checked out. Nobody saw her leave. Her Toyota still sat in the parking lot, engine cold, keys in the Q folder. Her suitcase was still zipped on the bed. Her phone sat on the nightstand at 4% battery, with 41 unread texts from her sister asking, "Are you okay? Why aren't you answering?" That was 3 weeks before I took the job. I should have walked away the moment I heard about it. Instead, I took the graveyard shift at the Red Cedar, motor in on Highway 41 because it paid $2 more an hour than the gas station, and I needed the money more than I needed sleep. Nobody warned me what room 9 really was. The manager, a tired guy named Pete who chain-smoked in the office doorway, laid out the rules on my first night like he was reading a grocery list. Don't rent room 9 unless every other room is full. If a guest specifically asks for it, write their name down twice, once in the book, once on a sticky note you keep in your pocket. And if the phone rings after 2 a.m. and nobody's there, don't hang up first. I laughed. He didn't. Motel's 40 years old, he said. People go missing here. Not a lot? Just enough. Then he handed me the keys and left, and I sat alone listening to 18-wheelers rumble past on 41, wondering what enough meant. I found out inside a week. The guest records went back decades, stacked in a filing cabinet. Nobody had touched since the motel, switched to computers. I wasn't supposed to be in there. I told myself I was organizing. Really, I was looking for a pattern, because Pete's words wouldn't leave my head. 11 names. 11 guests, over almost 40 years, who checked into room 9 and never checked out. Cars left running out of gas in the lot. Wallets untouched. One man's dinner sat half-eaten on the table, fork on the floor, like he'd stood up mid-bite and simply stopped existing. Every police report ended the same way. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle, case remains open. 11 people. No blood, no bodies. No answers. And tucked beneath the last folder, where nobody would look unless they were already looking too hard, I found a security tape from 6 years back. The label scratched out except for 3 letters, R9. I shouldn't have played it. I know that now. The footage was grainy, the timestamp glitching the way old tape does. A man walked in from the parking lot at 11:47 p.m., carrying a duffel bag, moving like every other tired traveler who'd ever crossed that lot. He walked to room 9, he let himself in. The timestamp jumped. 2:03 a.m., same door. Same man, except now he was walking out, and the duffel bag looked fuller and he moved slower, like something inside it had weight it didn't have before. I froze the frame on his face. It was Frank, the same Frank who'd fixed the motel's plumbing and window units for as long as anyone could remember. The same Frank who brought Pete coffee every morning. The same Frank who'd shaken my hand on my first day, smiling and said, "You'll get used to the night shift." Everybody does eventually. Frank didn't just work at the motel. He lived there, room 4, permanently for 11 years. I didn't sleep after that. I started watching him the way you watch something, when you already suspect what it is, but you're terrified of being right. He always volunteered to check room 9 before new guests arrived. He always knew which travelers were driving alone, which ones had nobody expecting a call, which ones nobody would report missing for days. He was choosing them, carefully, patiently, for years. I didn't go to the sheriff's office first, not after what this place had already cost. Instead, I called a name stapled to one of the old missing person folders, Ellis Marsh, a retired investigator who'd worked the original disappearances, back when the motel still had a payphone out front. When I told him what I'd found, his voice went dead quiet. "Send me nothing over email," he said. "I'll come to you?" Ellis checked in 2 nights later under a fake name, telling Pete he was just passing through. He wasn't. He spent that first night cross-referencing the files. ID photographed, names, dates, license plates. By the second night, he'd found what I missed. Every disappearance happened during a new moon. When the parking lot lights on that side of the building mysteriously flickered, Out for exactly 1 hour. Maintenance issue, the old reports called it. Frank did maintenance. Ellis wanted one more night of surveillance before calling it in. He didn't want to spook anyone. If Frank sensed he was being watched, 11 families might never get their answers. That was the last time I heard his voice. I found him near dawn in a maintenance corridor behind. Room 9, a narrow hallway hidden behind a panel that wasn't on any blueprint Pete had ever shown me. Ellis had gone in looking for proof. He never came back out breathing. The corridor smelled like bleach, and something under the bleach that bleach is used to hide. Shelves lined the walls, personal items, carefully organized, dated. Driver's licenses. Wedding rings. A child's stuffed rabbit, one ear chewed soft from years of being held. 11 names. 11 lives, reduced to labeled shelves in a hallway that officially didn't exist. Frank found me before I found the exit. "You weren't supposed to see this yet," he said, calm as a man discussing the weather. "But since you have, nobody misses the ones nobody's watching for." I ran, my body moved before I decided to, past doors that all looked the same, his flashlight swinging behind me like something with its own pulse. I hit a dead end, turned, and he was already there, closer than sound should allow, and for one full second, I understood exactly how 11 people had vanished without a scream anyone heard. Then the door behind him exploded open, and 4 sheriff's deputies had him on the ground before. I even registered the word freeze. Ellis hadn't been as unwatched as Frank believed. He'd mailed a sealed file to the Hollow Creek Sheriff's Office 3 days earlier, with instructions to open it if he didn't check in by sunrise. He never got to see them read it. They took Frank alive. He didn't fight the arrest, didn't deny anything. He seemed almost relieved, like a man finally allowed to stop performing a role he'd worn too long. In the interrogation room, he confessed to 11 murders without blinking, his voice so flat it made the detectives' hands shake taking notes. But when they asked why room 9, specifically why that room, every time he only smiled and said the room had been his long before he ever worked there. Long before the motel even had that name. The current owners have run the Red Cedar Motor Inn for 41 years. Frank said he'd been coming back for longer than that. They tore room 9 down to the studs after his arrest. Behind the drywall, sealed inside the wall itself, they found a 12th shelf. Empty, waiting, freshly dusted.
I was the last motel clerk on Highway 41. Room 13 never stayed empty. I found the previous clerk's name scratched into the underside of the front desk drawer. 3 days into the job, not written, scratched, like with a key, over and over, like he was trying to carve it into something permanent before he disappeared. His name was Alan Cho. I never met him. I was told he quit without notice. I found out later that wasn't true. The Black Lantern Motel sits on Highway 41, 20 minutes past anything you'd call a town. The kind of place that exists because truckers need somewhere to stop. And nobody's built anything newer in 40 years. 22 rooms. I was hired to run the graveyard desk, midnight to 8, and the owner, a quiet man named Harlan Voss, told me exactly one rule during my entire training. Never rent out room 13, not to anyone, for any reason, even if every other room is full. I asked why. He said it was already occupied. I laughed. He didn't. The first 2 weeks were unremarkable. Truckers, a few families passing through, one couple who fought loudly enough that I almost called the sheriff's office. Hollow Creek PD has jurisdiction out that far, which I only knew because a deputy stopped in for coffee one night and mentioned it, almost like he was checking on the place, rather than just passing through. Room 13's door stayed shut the whole time, but the light under it came on every night around 11 and turned off around 4 in the morning, on a schedule so consistent I could have set a clock to it. Nobody had a key, Nobody was assigned there. I checked the guest log going back years, out of boredom more than suspicion, and room 13 hadn't been rented since. A date scrawled in ink that had mostly faded. October, 11 years ago. Then a man showed up at 1 a.m. asking specifically for room 13. He was maybe 50, calm, dressed like he'd driven a long way. He said he'd stayed there before, years ago, and wanted the same room for old time's sake. I told him it wasn't available. He asked if that was Harlan's rule. I said yes. He nodded slowly, like that confirmed something for him, and said, "Tell Harlan that Denise says hello." Then he walked back out to his car and drove off into the dark toward Route 16, and I never saw him again. I told Harlan the next evening. His face did something I still can't fully describe, somewhere between grief and fear, and he told me that Denise was his daughter. She'd stayed in room 13 11 years ago with a boyfriend Harlan never approved of. She never checked out. The official story, the one the sheriff's office filed, was that she'd run off with the boyfriend and started a new life somewhere far away. Harlan didn't believe that story. He'd kept the room exactly as it was, untouched, because some part of him still expected her to come back to it. I asked what happened to the boyfriend. Harlan said nobody ever found him either, and that was supposed to be the end of the conversation. But I couldn't let it go. Something about that light turning on every night at 11 wouldn't leave me alone. 3 nights later, I unlocked room 13 myself. The room was exactly like Harlan described, frozen in a decade-old moment. A suitcase still open on the bed, half unpacked. A magazine on the nightstand with a date on the cover that made my stomach drop. And on the wall near the closet, a series of scratches at roughly the height of a person's shoulder, dragging downward like something had been pulled toward the floor and had fought the entire way. That's when I found the drawer with Alan Cho's name scratched inside it, tucked in the closet, not the front desk like I first thought. I'd misremembered exactly where until I stood in that room, and it came back to me clearly. He must have taken that drawer in here at some point. Why? I don't know. Underneath his name, in different handwriting, someone had scratched 3 words. She never left. I heard the door click shut behind me. It wasn't the wind. There was no wind that night. I remember that specifically because the highway outside was dead silent. No trucks passing. Nothing. The door had simply closed. Softly, deliberately, the way someone closes a door when they don't want to wake whoever's inside. I didn't try the handle. I stood very still and said out loud that I was sorry, that I didn't mean to intrude. And after what felt like several minutes, but was probably only seconds, the door clicked back open on its own. I never went back into that room again. I gave Harlan back his master key the next morning and told him I couldn't work there anymore. And he didn't argue. He just looked tired. The way someone looks after carrying something heavy for 11 years and finally admitting out loud that they're never going to put it down. I looked up Alan Cho's name a few months later, mostly out of guilt for being unable to stop thinking about him. I found a single missing person listing, filed by nobody local, from a woman in another state asking if anyone had seen her brother. Last known employer, the Black Lantern Motel on Highway 41. Nobody had responded to it. Not once in over a year. I think about that light in room 13 sometimes, right around 11 at night, wherever I am now. I think about the fact that Harlan never once suggested tearing the room out, renovating it, making it into something new. Some part of him needed it to stay exactly as it was. Some part of me thinks that's not really his choice to make anymore.